In this video, we're going to take a look at the edit tools. So if we go into simulation and then hair edit, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of options here. So we're going to start by breaking this palette off and just moving it to the side. The first thing we'll need to do is make sure that we select the hair object. And once we do that, you'll see that some of these options become available to use. But we're still missing some of the key ones here, like cut guides, copy guides, delete guides, convert from spline, and so on. The reason for this is because we actually need a selection to work with. So we'll choose the Live Selection tool and select some guides to work with. And you'll notice that the selection mode is currently set to Guides. I could have this set to any of the selection modes to work with these functions, but in this case, Guides is going to illustrate things just fine. So let's start by trying out the first button here, Cut Guides. If we click this, it's going to remove the current selected guides. Now, I can always paste the guides back in, and you'll see they're pasted in as unrooted guides. So in this case, you'd need to go to Simulation, Hair Tools, and then Set Roots. And then just make sure that you click Apply so that it sets the roots back onto your object. But this isn't the only thing that Paste Guides is good for. You can also use Paste Guides to paste from one hair object to another. In this example, I have two pelt objects and two hair objects. One of the hair objects has guides associated with it and the other one does not. So I'm going to go to the Cut Guides, and then I'll click on the second hair object, and I'm going to Paste Guides. And you'll see it pastes them in place. Now, this is partly because the hair objects that I had were already linked to the same things. But in the case where this didn't happen, it still shows that you can take the guides from one object and paste them into a second object. Of course, the guides are unrooted, so of course you'll have to set roots again. I'm just going to undo here, and I'll undo again so that our guides are back on the original hair object. And this time we're going to use copy guides. And this one is a lot like cut, except it's non-destructive, so it's not going to get rid of anything off our original object. So I can choose copy guides, go to the second hair object, and paste guides. Going back to a simpler scene again, we're going to take a look at the rest of the options here. The first one is paste to new. So if we copy the guides or cut the guides, we then have the option of pasting to new. And this is going to simply paste these into a brand new hair object for us. So you'll see we have our original hair, and we have a new hair object. If we take a look at the link field for the new hair object, there's no link set. So if we wanted to attach this to anything, we have to make sure we drag the geometry into the link field, such as the pelt object here. And then we have to go Simulation, Hair Tools, Set Roots, and Apply. I'm just going to undo a couple steps backwards here. And the next option we have in the list here is Delete Guides. This is simply going to remove any of the guides that you have selected from the hair object. So if I click Delete Guides, you'll see that the guides disappear. So we'll just undo again to step back, and we'll take a look at Convert to Spline. So what Convert to Spline is going to do is take your entire hair object and convert that into a spline object. So you'll see here that the hair has now been turned into a spline object. There's still a hair tag, but really, it's just an empty shell, so it's not going to do anything for us. We could delete the hair tag, and we'll still have these splines that we can work with. Now let's say you use a different styling system, and to get those into Cinema 4D, all you have are splines that you exported. Well, in this case, you have the option to convert from spline. So if we take the spline object and click on Convert from Spline, you'll see that it generates a hair object. And the hair object matches the spline, but all the hairs are unrooted. So what I'm going to do is select the spline object and delete it, just so you know that we're not doing anything with it at all. I'll go to the hair object and make sure that I link the hair object to the pelt. And again, I'll go into Simulation, Hair Tools, Set Roots, and Apply. Now if I was trying to render this, it's going to render as guides. So the next thing would be to go into the hair object, find the hairs tab, roots, and then choose something like polygon area. And if I render again, you'll see that I get all of my hairs interpolated between the guides. Next we have connect and split guides. So I'm going to make a selection here. And let's just choose all of these guides right here. And I can choose to split these. And this is going to split those guides off into a completely new hair object. If we take a look at the guides, the nice thing is the link is set on both. So now I can quickly create two different sections of hair, but have control over those individually. This might be good in a situation where you have something like eyebrows or a mustache on a character that you would like to separate from, say, the hair. Connect guides is going to be the reverse. I can select two hair objects and then connect those, and it's going to produce a new hair object for me. So if we get rid of these previous two hair objects here, rather than just disabling them, I'm only left with the new hair object. Again, the link is broken, so you have to set the link, and then you'll want to go to Simulation, Hair Tools, Set Roots, and Apply. It's always good to double check the Hairs tab as well. You'll see that the root is set to As Guides, so we'll change that back to Polygon Area, and if we render, everything should be just fine. The next option is Even Segments, and this is going to be really handy when you are editing your hair and you change the distance between the points on the hair. So let's start by going to Simulation, Hair Mode, and set it to Points so we can see the individual points on the hair. And then we're going to go to Simulation, Hair Tools, Brush. Now, when I first brush, you'll see that the actual distance between these doesn't change. And that's going to be related to the Hair IK checkbox. We can turn that off. And now if I brush, you'll see that it changes the distance between the points on an individual hair. Well, now I can go to Simulation, Hair Mode, change that to Guides again, select just the guide that I want to change, so go Live Selection and select just this guide here, and we can click on Even Segments. And it's going to try to change the distribution of the points on that hair so that they are more even throughout the guide. And maybe to show this better, we'll undo a step, go to Simulation, Hair Mode, Points, and if we select these points, that might highlight them better for you guys on the video. And we'll click on Even Segments again. And you'll see that it does its best to maintain a good spacing between all those points, as well as maintain the shape of the guide. We then have an option called Set as Dynamics, and what this is going to allow you to do is set the dynamic state, or the initial dynamic state for your hair. So I'm going to click on the Move tool here, because if I'm in the Live Select, if I go to the hair object and try any sort of dynamic thing in here, you're not going to see it. It only wants to show you what happens as you're styling the hair. So I'll switch to the Move tool, and you'll see this kind of dumps the hair into a pose already, or a place where it's been affected by dynamics, and that's because I had clicked the Relax button a couple times there. You'll see if I do that, it's going to play 10 frames of my simulation. But as soon as I move the playhead and go back to frame 0, it's going to reset that. So what if I wanted to, say, scrub through here and have my simulation start from this state? Well, this is where Set as Dynamics comes into play. I can even go to frame 0 and tell this to relax 30 frames, and click on Relax. It's going to jump ahead 30 frames. And then I can click Set as Dynamics. And that's going to set this as the initial state for the hair. So you'll see if I scrub around and go back to frame 0, it's going to start the dynamic simulation from that point in time. The next option, Hairs to Guides, is going to take all of the hairs in your object and convert those to guides. So in this case, you'll see that we have a fairly sparse guide count, but in the Hairs tab, we have 5,000 hairs. If I click on Hairs to Guides, it's going to convert all of those 5,000 hairs into a separate guide. You'll see that in the Hairs tab, the roots is now set to As Guides, so it's going to render each one of these individual guides. If I really wanted to, I could set this back to Polygon Area and increase the number of hairs, and now this number of hairs will be interpolated between all of these guides. We then have an option to unroot guides. So you've seen rooting of guides many times, but in this case, we can now select guides that we want and unroot them. This would allow you to move the roots around on the object or even transfer it from object to object, at which point you could root the guide back onto the new surface.